Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the General Government Committee to order. Welcome, and may we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. Councilmember Dennehy.
Here.
Councilmember Maloney.
Here.
Council Smisher. Here. Council Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Tracy.
Here.
Councilmember Worthington.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Troutman.
Here.
And I would also note that we have Catherine Sellers available to us online this evening. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the funding agreement for the Humane Society of Fremont County and a potential feather signs and wall-mounted banner ordinance. And with that, Ryan, are you going to?
Yeah, similar to about a month ago, you had other agencies come in and provide presentations to City Council regarding their funding agreements for 2024. We've asked Doug Ray and the Humane Society to be here to provide an update on their 2023 activities and answer questions for Council. So I would turn it over to Doug at this point.
Okay, now it's on. Okay. Yeah, I guess I want to apologize first for not being at the December meeting. I had, like I said to Ryan and to Cindy, I had surgery, and the day after I had surgery was this meeting, and I just was in no condition to check, so I apologize for that. Because I certainly would have loved to have been here to elaborate on some of Mayor Smith's comments.
No apologies necessary.
Okay.
We understand.
So you all have a copy of the 2022 budget in front of you and the 2023 that I sent to Cindy. I really just need around 10, 12, as long as I don't elaborate a lot, maybe 15 minutes to get through what I want to talk about. Then we'll turn it over to you folks. You can answer any questions, whatnot, that we have. But a little history on the animal shelter. The shelter was, was incorporated in December of 1950. That's 73 years ago. We are an open admission animal shelter, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know what that means. And all it means is we are an open door facility, which means we have to accept every animal that's brought to the shelter. We accept the very young, the very old, the very sick, the very injured, the cute, the not so cute, the highly adoptable, the not so highly adoptable, and everything in between. We have to take them all. That's what an open admission animal shelter is, and that's what we have been for the past 73 years. We provide animal services to Canyon City, Florence, Rockville, Coal Creek, West Cliff, Silver Cliff, Custer County, and for the last year, we gave Fremont County 9 months of animal services until they canceled the contract in September of 2023. In 2013 and 2014, several issues were identified at the animal shelter. They had failed 5 state inspections. Medical procedures were routinely botched, animal surgeries, spay or neuter. In addition to the state being involved, the Attorney General was involved. And when I was hired, the shelter was quite a hot mess on my first day. The shelter had a 52% save rate back then. 3 out of every 4 cats that came into the animal shelter were killed. The volunteer and the foster programs were completely eliminated for the community. Dogs were being imported from Kansas, and healthy dogs at the animal shelter were being killed to make space for the dogs coming in from Kansas because they were highly adoptable. There's a lot more, but you get the idea of a lot of changes need to be made at the animal shelter. Excuse me. The Humane Society Board did a national search for a new director, and my wife had been harping on me for quite some time. She wanted to be close to her family here in Colorado. So I had been looking for a job in Colorado, and when this job hit my radar, I applied for it. My first interview was in July of 2014. The board hired me in August of 2014, and I started 6 weeks later. During those 6 weeks, I asked the board for several documents, one being the financials. I wanted to see the financials from the previous 3 years. I wanted to see where the money was coming from, and I wanted to see how it was leaving the shelter. One of the first things I noticed was the shelter was extremely underfunded through the contracts that it had, the services that it was providing out there. I estimated from my home in Rhode Island that the shelter was being shorted around approximately $100,000 a year. The combined per capita back then was $1.07, and just so you know, animal control contracts are based off of per capita, the residents that the shelter serves. So back then it was $1.07, and the national average for contracted animal shelters across the country back then was $5.85. So the Humane Society was at $1.07. The largest offender was Fremont County. For decades, they had been providing funding to the animal shelter for $14,000 a year. That's 56 cents per capita. Again, when the shelter was averaging 107 to a national average of 585. So you would think that being $100,000 short, the first thing I would have done when I started here was I would have said, hey, we need more money, but I didn't. I really wanted to give everybody the benefit of the doubt because maybe entities like the Fremont County had no idea that they were underfunding the shelter. I thought it was important that we gave everybody the benefit of doubt. And secondly, I wanted to prove to everyone that we could do the job that I thought we could do, and we could fix all the violations that were happening in front of the State Attorney General before I turned around and I asked anybody for a single penny more. On my first day, we pretty much fixed all the violations and we stopped the killing right away. My first 3 months, I started on September 24th. My first month in October, we saved 94%, 99% in November, and 100% in December. The little shelter in Canyon City was now national. It was on national news. We were also on the national life-saving map, and there is such a thing as a life-saving map across the country. Just so you know, the save rates from 2015 are 94, 96, 99, 96, 97, 98, 99, 98, and we're year-to-date through November this year, we're at 97. Chris, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce Crystal. Crystal's my finance manager. I should have done it at the very beginning. Sorry, Crystal. Crystal's the one that does all the numbers for me in every which way. Also, the save rate calculation, that's very simple for us. It's 100% of the animals in divided by 100% of the animals out. So all the animals I talked about before are included in the save rate. So for the past 3 years, if we saved 99, 98, 97% of the animals, that's every single animal that comes in the building we've saved. In 2015, I wrote a 3-year long-term budget plan because I wanted to better fund the animal shelter. And while every last area fought me ferociously out there, as this young lady knows because she was sitting next to me in every single budget meeting we had, Canyon City did not. Canyon City supported me from the day that I got here, pretty much until today. You know, I can think about the top of my head, I can think we sat right back there. You guys used to have a table back there, that's where we had the meeting, and I think of Colby and I think of John Havens were the two biggest supporters of the shelter that day. It was just, I don't want to say it was a love fest, but wow, it was quite different from anything else I was experiencing out there. Doug, I believe his last name was Dobson, he had a little bit of a concern with the extra funding I was asking for, but one of the city councilors was very clear. He just looked at Doug and tapped the table and said, find the money, Doug. And it was just like, the day could not have gone any better, so I appreciate that. During a meeting with Ron Bates, and anybody who doesn't know Ron Bates, Ron used to be a city councilor here, a few years later, Ron suggested that I have my 3rd year in my plan and I make it into 4 years. So I met with a few people, officials not in Canyon City, and I asked them what they thought. And they agreed, they called it a good gesture on Ron's part, because I said it was Ron's idea. So we pushed the budget plan from 3 to 4 years. Now that said, John Havens and Jim Meisner did not agree with it at all. They did not want me to cut a single bite out of the budget. But it was what it was. I thought it was the right thing to do at the time. In 2017, the shelter won something called the Henry Berg Achievement Award. And what that does is it identifies our small shelter here in Canyon City as one of the 2 best open admission animal shelters in the entire country. Pretty good stuff, I mean, for being out here in small little Canyon City. Also, over the past 8 years, our shelter has owned the highest open admission save rate for all of Colorado. And as I said earlier, we entered December at a 97% save rate, so I expect that to be 9 years in a row that we will have the highest save rate through all of Colorado. We also ended up in the top 1% for animal shelters in the entire country 3 times over the 9 years that I've been here. Pretty good stuff for a small animal shelter in Canyon. But the shelter that was founded 73 years ago is in jeopardy right now. Rising expenses, for all nonprofits for that matter. It has really put us in a really bad financial place. Emergency medical costs are out of control. And what that means is we receive a stray animal. That stray animal needs emergency medical. We have to send that animal to our vet because it's the right thing to do. The animal might be dying. It might have been hit by a car. It might have been attacked by a wild animal, whatever. Canyon City alone last year, we spent $20,197. The county was $92.73. Florence was $26.14. The smaller areas combined for $693, so that's a total of $32,777 just in emergency medical alone last year. Shelter operations last year increased $27,293. As you probably know, the Fremont County Commissioner shorted the shelter $22,500 in the fourth quarter of this year. It's been really difficult to keep pace with the annual minimum wage hikes, and anybody who owns a business knows that. Our payroll has increased $41,211 since 2021. And even though this young lady next to me is going to tell me what the payroll budget should be for next year, my rough estimate is $411,647, which is about $64,000 less than 2023. That's minus 80 staffing hours. We just cannot staff the shelter like we used to because we just don't have the funds anymore. So I'm really sorry to say that the $4 per capita that I asked for with that long-term plan that me and Ron were talking about years ago, it's not $4 anymore. I wish it was. It's pretty much closer to $5 to remain an open mission animal shelter. That's an additional $40,000 to $50,000 in annual municipal funding. And since the county doesn't like to play nice in the sandbox, I don't ever see that happening. So to sum all this up, with the county playing games with me for the past 2 years and not signing a contract for 2024, there's no contract in place right now, along with our increased expenses, we really can't walk this path for very much longer. Changing the shelter's focus is really the last thing I want to do, but I'll say it. I mean, I think the county is forcing me to consider everything at this point. You know, we've reduced our operating expenses. We've increased our fees to the public. We laid off two staffers last February, and we have 2 open full-time positions that we just can't fill. That's a lot of staff that we can no longer have. I mean, we need more funding to remain an open mission animal shelter. So let's talk about that for a second. There are 2 types of animal shelters out there. There's an open mission shelter, which we talked about, which we are, and a limited mission. The difference is limited mission animal shelters don't have contracts with anybody, and they can pick and choose what animals come into the animal shelter. Open missions can't. They have to take whatever they get. So if the shelter was to get into a financial place where we can't afford to have this year like we did year after year after year. If we were to turn into a limited mission animal shelter, we would not have any contracts with anyone. We wouldn't be able to take stray intakes from anyone. That includes Canyon City. We wouldn't be able to take hoarding cases anymore, like the 73 cats we took in 2017 or 2018 from one house in Canyon City. She had 73 cats in a house. We took them all. They all came to the animal shelter, and we adopted every last one of them. We wouldn't take cord holds. We wouldn't take bite holds. You know, there's a lot to consider there. But when I'm saying all this, I want you all to know that for the past 9 years, if you know anything about me, I've been pretty vocal about things at the animal shelter, and I've been fighting really hard. And I will continue to fight for the animals until my last day as director here, which is not going to be anytime soon, as far as I'm concerned. So I would fight hard to make sure that the shelter does not turn into a limited mission animal shelter, and we remain the open mission animal shelter we've been for the past 73 years. And I'll end with this tonight. For years, Jim Meisner sat right up there, and he used to say to me every meeting, Preston, you were at one of them when this place was full for the thing. He used to say to me every year, you're not asking for enough money. Every single year he would say this to me. We would meet individually. We would go out to lunch. He would call me Ray. He would call me Dougie. He would call me all these things. And he used to say to me time and time again, you're not asking for enough money. Well, Mr. Meisner was correct. We're not asking for enough money. So the shelter's in a really tough place right now. And though I could keep talking about it, I don't want to talk about what I think I want to talk about. I'd rather talk about what you folks might want to talk about. I brought everything with me, so hopefully I have all the answers. And if I don't, hopefully this young lady next to me does.
Thank you. Yes, Brian.
Just before you get into conversations, and Doug didn't cover it, but The shelter is asking for $86,400 for budget year 2024. That was in the 2024 budget, and we did approve that amount. And I did the math real quick, Doug. That comes out to pretty close to $5 per capita, correct?
I don't have that. Well, I don't have that. I have 72,431 for 423. So, gosh, Ryan, I wish I had my laptop. I'd
Yep.
plug it in and it would come out like that, you know?
That's all right. I
Yeah.
divided that number by 17,400.
You guys have always funded well, you guys
Yeah.
being the Canyon City has always funded the shelter well. In fact, let's go back to what I was talking about before. When the county did $14,000 a year for decades, you guys did $30,000. You guys almost gave us double the amount of money that the county did, and your area, Fremont County is a bigger area for the shelter to provide services to. So Canyon City has always been kind to the animal shelter.
Yeah, so I think per capita it comes out to about $495 per person.
Administrator Stevens, could you remind us what the funding was in prior years? Is that?
I think that number that Doug just read off, that 76 something, was 2023. It's a bigger jump this year.
I'm actually looking at my sheet here, like in 2019, and this will be quick. The city paid $61,300. 2020, $62,526. 2021, $65,652. 22, $67,293. 2023, $69,312. In 2024, I have $72,431, but you're saying that's wrong. So I'm looking. Oh, actually, that's what I have here. I have $72,431. So I'm not sure where your 85 is from. We'll take the 85. You know,
We had received a request with a higher number.
because I know the chief texted me, and we were talking about it, and I told him it was just like a 3% increase, and then I gave him that number, but I think what's in the contract is 72,431. So, and that's what I have on my per capita sheet, which is 423. But
Yeah.
so it would be more if it was.
Yeah,
Yes.
we don't have the 24 contract yet, so.
Okay.
Okay,
The chief never gave you this? No?
I've got a copy of that, but we're revamping all of our contracts
Okay,
for
okay.
2024.
Okay.
along those lines, have you provided the shelter with a copy of the proposed contract?
I did send that to
Yes.
Doug, but that was right before he was going in for his procedure, so.
I guess I need to meet with you on that because I don't understand. We have a contract to perform animal services that we need, all of these stipulations have to be in there for legalities and whatnot. And then the one that I read from you guys is something a little different, so I don't know if you want to merge them together, if we want to have two separate, I don't know. So maybe we need to meet and figure that out.
Yeah, we can meet, but essentially, the contract is going to govern, all the things that the city's requiring from all of our agencies that we're funding. And then we'll have an attachment as attachment A is with scope of services and all that legal jargon that
Yeah, and
you're talking about.
I saw you were asking everybody to report quarterly. I'm happy to report every month. I mean, I don't want to take up your all time, but if you all want me to meet monthly, I'm happy to give you a report on the shelter every month. I mean, I have no problem doing that.
And I understand the proposed contract was not in our packet tonight, I don't think. Is that-
It is not, no.
Okay,
And we expect to bring those to a future city council meeting for approval, but they're not in the contract, or not in the packet for tonight.
and so the situation we have with the other agencies that are seeking funding is they've all seen the standard part of the contract, and then there'll be addendums that cover the
Specific services. yes.
scope of work and those types of items. And along those lines, as I understand it, one of the things that we're requiring all of the agencies that are seeking city funding to do is to provide us with financials, which we have here tonight, and thank you for that, but also a budget, as I understand it. And so far, the other two agencies that we've dealt with have provided us with that budget,
2024 budgets, yes.
with the 2024 budgets. Doug, will that be forthcoming?
Yes. I mean, you have the budgets in front of you right now. I sent those.
No, excuse me. This is a profit and loss.
Nope, that's not what I sent Cindy. I sent Cindy today this. Are you looking for the 2023, 2024 budget?
Yes.
We don't have that yet. We typically wait until the beginning of January every year to do that, only because December is such a volatile month for us. You know, there's some Decembers where you might only clear 40,000, and some Decembers like this month where we're going to be well north of $120,000. So we'd like to wait till January to have some really hard numbers to work on. So I can get that to you immediately once we do have that.
So what I would suggest is that, you know, the city faces similar hurdles in budgeting, because there's a lot of by guess and by golly that goes on. But nonetheless, we start our budget process approximately in August, September-ish, depending. There's a lot of moving parts in the city, different departments. People are making projections about what the spending is going to be for the rest of the year. And for us to have a contract with you, you're going to need to be able to provide us a budget that we can review prior to awarding the contract. And so that means what that means for you, you being the Humane Society, is you're going to have to budget like we do, like, you know, just about every agency does, every business does. When you have a year-to-year budget, calendar year budget, you have to start way ahead of time to get your numbers together. And so you're going to have to change. The Humane Society is going to have to change the way that they budget if they expect a contract. This is my personal opinion, that you're going to have to provide us a contract if you expect us to fund the Humane Society. Now, I was on the radio this morning, and I want to soften that a little bit. You know, we do know I know the Humane Society provides a needed function, a necessary function, and a humane function for animals in this county and city. And that is certainly appreciated, and we certainly want to see that continue. But this is going to be a standard provision, excuse me, in our contracts with agencies that seek funding, and so you're going to need to provide that. And so it is already the 1st of January. When do you think you can have that contract to us? Budget. Thank you.
When do you think?
Thank you for that correction.
Less than 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions, comments from the panel?
I wanted to say one more thing, John. I forgot. Crystal spent hours after we met several months ago pulling all the numbers together for you that you asked for, and it's been sitting there. But I reached out to John and I says we need help. I need help with the county. This was before things got really bad, funding wise, and John came up with a recommendation that I'm not quite sure how to word that. But Crystal pulled all the numbers together, and quickly, can you just explain what it would be for Canyon City if we used the numbers that you pulled?
And if I could, let me preface that there's a similar agency that deals with funding sources from multiple government agencies, and that's the Combined Regional Communications Authority. They provide a service, and they have to figure out a way to charge for that service. And so they use a formula it is based on calls for service, and after the CRCA has been in operation now, I think about 8 years, I believe, somewhere around in there. And so they've got numbers that they can use as a baseline for the different agencies, which would be Fremont County, Canyon City, Florence, and now including Custer County. But they have a method to allocate to each agency the appropriate share for the funding for the total agency. And that's what we sat down and tried to go over, and that's the example that I brought to your shop that we talked about. So So yes, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
So throwing a few numbers together, can you hear me? How's that? Better?
Better.
Okay. So throwing a few numbers around, and I took the average of our expense budget for a couple of years, and then I also took the average number of animals that we get for those 2 years. And we were hoping to see what municipalities, what percentage of animals you guys bring us, and see if we would be able to fund our expense budget by the percentage of the animals that come from the different areas. And after throwing those numbers together for Canyon City, if we did that, the contract will be north of $386,000 if we did it that way, which is about 82% higher than what we were asking for per capita. So playing with the numbers, I flipped it a little bit and thought, well, how about I do it by cost of care per animal? Because we hear that a lot. Everywhere we go, people are wondering why we are not charging per animal versus per capita. And I took our vet bills and right to the public, I figured out what the cost of care would be for the cheapest animal that you can go is a male stray dog. And calculating that cost of care per animal per the number of animals that we get just in Canyon City, that was north of $176,000. So just playing with those couple of different ways to do budget and whatnot, that's why we really try to go for per capita instead, because it just comes out so much more reasonable.
And I think it's fair, too. You know, I've never, you know, when I initially got here and I was looking for the $4 per capita, I thought that was fair. Fair to the areas we were in, fair to the municipalities. And it was. That's why me and Jimmy went back and forth, because Jimmy thought he should be asking for more. But I said, we're good with 4. We're okay with 4. But then things have changed over the past 2-3 years, and the shelter's in a pretty bad place. So there was a time where 4 was good, and now closer to 5, like we were talking about, is much better for us.
So when you ran those numbers, were the, to help me understand it a little bit, basically what you were doing is you were taking the total cost for care, either per capita or per animal, and allocating that out to the individual providers of those animals, the city, the county. Is that, do I understand that right?
I did it both ways. I took the percentage of animals that come from Canyon City, and it was about 49%. And 49% of our expense budget, the average of the 2 years, was the $386,000. So in order to cover our expense budget solely from municipalities that we fund with. But I did it the other way also and did the cost of care per animal and multiplied that by the amount of animals we get from Canyon City, which was 176.
I think I understand, and I think that the difference is, and perhaps we might be productive to sit down again, but if we look at your profit and loss performance statement, okay, what you're talking about, the bottom line shelter operation number, is that right? Is that what you have for 2023 is $630,306, I believe, is that correct? Year-to-date actual, is that through January or or through December or?
This profit and loss here for 2023 is only through November.
Through November. Okay, so there's a couple of months missing from that.
It needs December on there.
December only, okay. So it's missing a month. But what it sounds to me that just talking from an accounting perspective, perhaps, if I can do that, that's awfully dangerous. I'm more of an engineer than an accountant, but I think that perhaps you misunderstood what the intent is. You have other sources of income other than what the contractees, if we call them that, Fremont County, Canyon City, the coal towns, Silver Cliff, I guess. You have the contract amounts that you receive from those entities. You also have other income. And so did you account for that other income in the total that you use to then either do on a percentage or a per capita, per animal or per capita?
I did it just off of our expense budget.
Yes, understand. So if we were to fund 100% of shelter operations, that's what we would be looking at. But as what the profit and loss statement shows us, I believe, is that's not how the shelter is operated, because of the other sources of income through fundraising efforts, very laudable and, very comprehensive, I think, by the shelter, and doing everything you can, I know, to try and maximize the money that you have available to care for the animals, which is the bottom line here. But so I think that to get kind of an apples to apples comparison, what we would be asking, or what I think would be useful, is to take your profit and loss and show the other sources of income, deduct that from your shelter operations. The leftover then is allocated between the entities, is what I would suggest. Other questions, or yes?
Thanks. Let's see, where do I go back to? I'm not sure I'm following you, John, but let's just set that aside for a minute. First, want to say just thanks for the shelter folks being here, and I know we all hugely appreciate the service that you provide. I think most of us are animal lovers, if not all, and it's such an essential service. I did have a specific question. You've touched on it several times, Doug, about, and tell me if I heard you correctly, that you don't currently have an agreement with the county. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And are you anticipating that that's just going to remain that way, or do we know at this point?
Well, the commissioners are blaming the sheriff, and the sheriff is blaming the commissioners. So at this point here, I don't think anybody's going to do anything. I think that they're fine. They've been going for 3.5 months now with no animal control, and I
Well, that's
think
what I
they're
was
good with
gonna
it. And I'm
ask.
hearing, and I can't confirm this, but I'm hearing that they're bringing animals to Pueblo. I don't have confirmation on that, but that would be horrific if that was the case. And if anybody here has a dog and your dog got loose and somebody picked it up and brought it to Pueblo, that's just not okay.
So we're not real sure, and we don't have to go way down this road, but we're not real sure really then what's happening with animal issues outside of the city limits of Canyon City and outside of other municipalities that do have an agreement with you, which is really unfortunate. And I don't know. I mean, I see things on Facebook, but it's just not clear to me what is happening with those animals. So that's unfortunate if that doesn't change. But I guess what I come back to is, yes, we do want to see the budget that you produce for 2024. And it sounds like that's going to be available in a couple of weeks. We do have our approved city budget already, and we have an amount that City Administrator Stevens mentioned a little while ago, the $86,400, if I understood correctly. And so I'm comfortable with that number that we, the city, have budgeted. But if there's any way, and I don't know what this is, but if there's any way over time for there to be other sources of income, I don't know if there's any national grants or anything like that that could help support the work of the shelter and make up for this loss of a contract with the county, that would be great.
I've written, as Crystal knows, because I come to her all the time saying I need this financial piece and that financial piece for grants, I've written, I think, 3 in December. The only one we received was a small grant from the Community Foundation right here in Canyon City. But the larger groups said no. It's unfortunate that the large, the large shelters that are making millions of dollars are the ones that receive the grants, when it's the smaller shelters like us that actually need the money. And moreover, at the end of the year, I always write a year-end letter that I send out to all of my donors. This year, I was pretty honest in the letter what's going on at the animal shelter, and I had no problem lighting up the shelter in my letter, or lighting up the county in my letter. And here's a shelter entering December, $51,000 down, and my donors just came through, and we have over $60,000 in from my year-end letter alone. I don't think that's going to wipe out our entire deficit, but I mean, people are good. You know, I mean, I wouldn't expect my donors to bail us out every year, but they sure did this year.
So I think that's all I had, just, you know, want us to show our support for the services you provide. I can't imagine if we didn't have a functioning Humane Society within the city limits, what we would be dealing with. Because, you know, frankly, and I see this on social media all the time, there's a lot of stray animals, and it's, you know, unfortunate. Sometimes maybe it's through no fault of the owner, but many times I think there's, whether it's lack of money, that owners don't have the resources they need to have the structures they need for their pets, or whatever it is. We know we have a huge problem with strays and everything associated with that, so we do appreciate the work
Well, so far
that's
this year,
done.
there's been 178 strays coming from Canyon City alone.
Yeah.
You know, so you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a lot of stray animals out there. And
Right.
It's unfortunate. And you say, I would hate to go back to the Wild Wild West days where there's just nobody out there picking up animals, and I don't know if that's happening with the county or not. We have a fantastic relationship with the chief and his officers, but I can't say we have that relationship with the county.
Well, I personally hope that improves somehow in the future, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions, comments? Mhm.
Thanks so much for being here, and thanks so much, the profit and loss work that you've done. It's really detailed, and it's really, really fantastic to see. Doug, you had shared a little bit about some of the challenges that you're facing with staffing and with the number of hours that you're able to stay open. Could you share just a little bit more, how many current staff do you have, and what are the current hours, and what does that look like going into 2024?
The current hours, we've had to cut an hour off each day. We used to be open to 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday. We were open 10 to 5
Before? previous?
before.
Yes.
Now we're open 11 to 4. So we've shaved off 2 hours a day because we had to. We're still open 10 to 4 on Saturdays. And I'm sorry, Amy, what was your other question?
If you could just share with us a little bit about your staffing pattern. You had mentioned that you had to lay a few staff
We-
off, and you have to keep a few staff positions open. How many staff do you have right now?
We did, Crystal, how many do we have? right now?
15.
15, okay, so we had to lay off a full-timer and a part-timer in February of last year. We had my full-time customer service manager left in October of this year. I have not filled the position because we simply can't, so I just have a customer service lead now. And I have another manager that's going to be leaving in a couple of weeks, and I won't be filling that position as well. So those are the numbers that I shared because we just don't have the funds to do it anymore. So it's, you know, like I was talking to my shelter manager the other day, if people come to the shelter and they have to wait a little longer, they're going to have to wait a little longer. There's no way around it. I don't know how else to do it at this point.
Okay. So 15 staff, and that's mostly full-time?
No, how many?
Yeah.
How many full-time?
Let's see. About 11 full-timers.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And I just to reconfirm, obviously, City Administrator Stevens was correct, but I did want to look it up myself, and in our 2024 approved budget, it does have that 86,400 number. So that is quite a bit higher than
I
what
don't remember saying that to Chief. Chief must have said Merry Christmas to me, right? I don't know. I just don't remember saying it to him. We were texting one day, and I don't know, maybe I got a little crazy and said something I didn't mean. I don't know.
So, did just want to reiterate and underscore
Okay.
that point. And that's a pretty significant uptick from what the city has provided in past years, going from. I think
It is,
was
that's why I
69 to
had, because
86.
I have on my end the 72,431, because that would have just been a 3% increase, like I said to the chief. I said, because he was doing the budgets then when he contacted me, and I said it's just 3 or 4%, and I think it turned out to be like 3.5%.
Okay, other questions, comments from council? Administrator Stevens, what do we need, what do we need, what is going to be the process to be able to sign a contract and start paying the shelter?
So we will, Doug and I will get together, we'll work out the details of the contract itself, and then that will come back before city council at a regular city council meeting to be voted on. The other service agreements will be coming forward here shortly as well. So all of that will come together. Of course, the one, you can approve the agreement, but we won't do any release of any funds until we have the 2024 budget from the shelter.
And just so you know, the current contract continues indefinitely until one side cancels it. So I'm pretty sure we just received something in from Canyon City in the mail yesterday, no?
I apologize, I have not been through my inbox yet.
So
Sorry.
Canyon City's pretty good at payments. I mean, the county didn't pay us for 3 months last year or 3 months the year before, but Canyon City is always spot on sending money to the animal shelter. So I thought I saw a check come in yesterday from Canyon City. So
I know the
that could
utility
have happened
bills are
based
there.
off of last year's contract, because that continues.
Yeah, I'd have to double check that. I don't know offhand.
Okay.
But, yeah, I noticed that language too, that it does continue, except under certain circumstances when one side or the other wants to
Correct.
cancel.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else then? Thank you for being here. We do
Thank you all.
appreciate the service
Thanks
that
for having
you
us here.
provide to the animals within the city limits and elsewhere. It is appreciated.
Welcome to the new people. Well, me, you're not new, but you were here before, and you were here before too, so, but you're new now. So, good to see you all again.
Meisner sat right here, by the way. And he always had the notes telling me to shut up or don't spend money. So you're right.
Don't forget to turn on your mic. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks again.
Okay, I think we're ready to move into topic letter B.
And I will turn it over to Patrick Mulready, the city planner.
Thank you.
If I can get my PowerPoint up. There we go.
Sorry, John,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, would it be okay if we invited some of the stakeholders for this one to come to the table and participate so that we can have that more informal conversation like we used to have when we sat over at the table?
Yes, I think that, I don't think that that's out of line. And so yes. You may have to move some chairs around. Thank you for being here. Patrick.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This evening, we are here to discuss a proposed ordinance which would amend Section 1707 of the city's Unified Development Code pertaining to sign regulations. Specifically, this ordinance would amend regulations concerning, among other things, feather flag signs in the Central Business, or CB, zone district. By way of a little bit of context, a little bit of history associated with this matter. As currently written, Section 1707 does not allow for the display of feather flags in the CB Central Business Zone District. This district primarily encompasses Main Street between 1st and 9th Streets, and feather flag signs refers to a type of sign in which a flexible or rigid pole is connected to a flexible fabric on one side, as shown in the image you see on the screen. It should be noted that this prohibition predates the adoption of the UDC in 2021, and that this prohibition of feather flag type signs is common for downtown areas throughout Colorado. Now, during the COVID pandemic, staff was asked to relax enforcement of certain code provisions, including signs, in deference to the economic conditions the pandemic and social distancing requirements were causing local small businesses. Enforcement of feather flag signs in the CB zone district was part of that relaxation of enforcement. When the pandemic officially ended in 2023, staff was instructed to resume enforcement of the sign code provisions, including the prohibition of feather flag signs. These enforcement efforts drew a negative reaction from businesses along Main Street who were utilizing feather flag signs. These merchants requested the council grant a moratorium on enforcement while the sign code was studied. Merchants involved in requesting the enforcement moratorium submitted a draft ordinance which would amend Chapter 17.07, and this proposed amendment is the subject the General Government Committee's discussion this evening. It was submitted to the city, as I understand, in late October. I was actually not in the office at the time. I was out of the country. But we took it to council for referral to a committee in early December, and that referral date is this evening's General Government Committee. Now, the draft ordinance as written would make the following modifications in Chapter 1707. Wall-mounted banner signs, which are a type of temporary sign, are changed to eliminate the requirements for permitting through the city. This would make them unpermitted and would become a tracking issue for how often this particular type of sign has been used on a commercial property. Feather flag signs, which are another type of temporary sign, were added to the Central Business District as a sign which can be allowed via the issuance of a sign permit, effectively legalizing them in the CB Central Business District. The duration of temporary signs is proposed to be increased from 3 non-consecutive 30-day periods of time per year to 4 non-consecutive 30-day periods of time per year. The paragraph describing the duration of temporary signs is amended to specifically exempt feather flag signs from having a maximum duration. Thus, not only would feather flag signs be legalized within the CB Central Business District zoning, they would also be allowed 365 days per year, kind of begging the question, how is that in fact temporary? The maximum height of feather flag signs would be increased from 8 feet to 12 feet. The standards associated with temporary signs is amended to take care of 3 modifications in how they are taken care of. Condition of feather flag signs stipulates that they will not be faded, ripped, or torn, or otherwise unsightly. Feather flag signs are to be situated in a base that is, quote, specifically designated for flags, end quote, or a planter which can be moved and do not pose a tripping hazard, and feather flag signs are to be taken inside at the close of business daily. Now, it must be stated that staff does not support the majority of these proposed modifications. With the exception of extending the duration of temporary signs from 3 non-consecutive 30-day periods of time to 4 non-consecutive 30-day periods of time, the other changes are objectionable for a variety of reasons. The CB Central Business District is the most pedestrian-oriented district in Canyon City, which means it is the most inappropriate location within the city to place signs which congest the pedestrian area and block views. A 12-foot height for feather flags will significantly exacerbate blocked view corridors along Main Street in the CB zone. These barriers to pedestrian movement along Main Street would effectively become permanent additions to downtown and allow for all businesses along Main Street to have feather flag signs. While staff appreciates that the merchants who drafted the language pertaining to the conditions feather flag signs must meet, not faded, ripped, or torn, for example, where and how they are to be displayed, and that they must be brought inside at the close of business, unfortunately, it has been observed that these provisions are not being regularly followed by the merchants who are displaying feather flag signs on Main Street currently. Finally, the language used in the draft ordinance is vague and subject to debate as to what meets the standard and what doesn't. As a result, these provisions will require significantly more staff time and resources to enforce. The objections raised on the previous slide are ones of practicality and reasonableness. However, there is an even larger issue these proposed sign code amendments transgress. These changes are inconsistent with the intent of the sign code as expressed in section 1707.010A. To quote the Unified Development Code, the purpose of this chapter is to set out regulations for erecting and maintenance of signs while preserving the right of free speech and expression. The regulations of this chapter shall provide a balanced and fair legal framework for design, construction, and placement of signs that, and here it gives 4 criteria, the last 2 are the relevant ones here, protects the public welfare and enhances the appearance and economic value of the community by protecting scenic views and avoiding sign clutter that can compromise the character, quality, and viability of commercial corridors, and ensures that signs are compatible with their surroundings and prevents the construction of signs that are a nuisance and to occupants of adjacent and contiguous property due to brightness, reflectivity, bulk, or height. These changes do not protect the public welfare and economic value of the community by protecting treasured views. They also do not prevent nuisance conditions from bulk or height. It is incumbent upon staff to be concerned about the aesthetic impact these proposed changes would have on Main Street. Taken to its logical conclusion, these changes would result in a Main Street that looks a little like this. This is a simulation of the 600 block of Main Street in which every business front is displaying a feather flag sign. This is not a look staff advocates in favor of pursuing. Thus, staff finds the proposed ordinance amending the city sign code, chapter 1707 of the Unified Sign Code, is inconsistent with the intent statement of the sign code as expressed in section 1707-010A, introduces ambiguity into the enforcement of sign code provisions where none exist currently, which has every potential to increase disputes during enforcement activities, would make signs which are currently not permitted signage downtown into permanent year-round type of signage every business owner along Main Street could employ, create standards for maintenance and care of feather flag signs which those who are using them now are not in fact meeting, would hamper the city's efforts to make the historic downtown an accessible, attractive, and robust district for residents and visitors alike, and would result in an aesthetically unpleasing shopping district that would be difficult to undo should it be deemed a bad decision after the fact. Therefore, staff's recommendation is that the General Government Committee reject this draft ordinance and not allow it to proceed to public hearing before Planning Commission and City Council. That would conclude my presentation. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Patrick. Do we have any questions of Patrick at this point?
I was, when you say non-concurrent, do you mean non-consecutive?
I'm sorry, non-consecutive, yes.
Okay, because it might be that when you said not, I was reading non-concurrent, I thought maybe the businesses would take turns, and maybe on certain days, some businesses could.
No, the way the ordinance is written, you can have 90 days, and you can split that 90 days up into three 30-day intervals,
But not consecutive.
but not consecutive.
Okay, that's, thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments? On the issue of barriers for pedestrians, we did have a moratorium, and we did relax the rules or relax enforcement on these banner signs, the flags, the feather flags. Did we see significant pedestrian impediments for the flags that we had?
We have not received, at least I have not been made aware of additional pedestrian conflicts with the feather flag signs that are currently in use.
There were some see-click fix complaints about feather flags, but I don't have those numbers in front of me. I'm sorry? It's been throughout the time that the flags have been out.
Since the moratorium's been,
I don't know if it was since the moratorium. I'd have to go back and look at that.
Okay. Any other, yes?
I guess I have a couple of comments that I would like to make, but I'd really like to hear from those who are most directly impacted by the decision first, if that's all right.
Sure.
I guess.
It's your, yeah.
I guess I don't understand it. I really don't understand why we have all these ordinances prohibiting us from advertising, from being able to make our store better known. I personally, and I'm very, very central downtown, I've not heard the complaints, and I think that it would be good of the city to let us know when there have been problems with the feather signs, because we're not aware of them. And we have talked before in meetings with many of you that we will help enforce this, but if we don't know that there's things that are happening that haven't been told to us, and then we're told we can't do this. We have tried to make sure that everyone knows we have a certain amenity zone that we want to put the feather flags in. I know some blocks don't have those, and we would have to work that out. But the feather flags, one of the reasons that that nothing has been done during this moratorium as far as the tattered flags and wherever those are, is we've not been given that responsibility. Because we did talk about it in one of the meetings, that we would, as business owners, take responsibility for our neighbors. If they have tattered flags, we would go to them and say, you know, this is not beautiful for us, this is not a good flag, why don't you order another one? And we would help enforce that. But just to say that we can't have any of them because a few have not maintained their flags, I think is unreasonable. I don't understand why this has become such an issue.
And I think, you know, it's more than just tattered flags that we've seen during the moratorium, that we've seen the flags left out overnight as well, and the stands being left out in the walkways as well.
And then again, Ryan, we didn't
during
have
the
any
moratorium.
kind of guidelines to put out to say this is what we're expecting. If you do have feather flags, this is what we expect of you. I mean, I look at our downtown, some of the facades of some of the buildings are in such terrible condition that to me is more of a hindrance to the beauty of our downtown than a few feather flags on our sidewalks. And I just feel like we're picking at these small things that help us as business owners. And, you know, we've talked about the trees. The trees block our windows. Even now, my trees have not been, are still low enough that they're still covering the signs of my windows. And so a flag brings a little bit more attention to us because people don't know a lot of times where our businesses are if we don't have the flags. So that's a concern for us downtown, is why don't we do something to help beautify our facades and encourage business owners to do that instead of just these things that are kind of an obvious thing that we can limit businesses from doing.
And we do have our facade improvement grants, and we have a lot of people who are taking advantage of those facade improvement grants, and we are seeing those facades being cleaned up.
Also, too, during the time that, I mean, granted, they were illegal during the COVID time, and yet they were still allowed. And even after they found out that they were illegal, there's never been an increase in people bringing flags out. This whole time that this supposedly has been an issue, the flags that are there are there. They're not going to be as your demonstration is. That's just unrealistic. And by bringing the ordinance, by specifying what can and can't be done, will allow us and you both all the ability to regulate this, to guide everybody to say, hey, look, this is not right, you have to do something. Right now, there is nothing. This will allow that, and you can have in the ordinance where they can be and what they can be easily, and still maintain the aesthetics of being downtown. It's very simple, as long as the wording is put in there correctly, as where you can put them, what is the views, what is, make sure that has not been happen. Yes, there was problems about flags being put in the walkway or having tripping hazards and stuff. The ordinance could place that to where that is no longer an issue.
I understand that. I think there are other issues to be considered as well, as Patrick mentioned, especially with the increasing of the size. You know, if
The
you're
size that are there, the biggest, even the 12-foot right now, that's what most of them are right now. That has never been a problem.
right. So I think if you legalize them, you're going to see more of them, because even as you're driving down Main Street and you see these signs, they're blocking the wall-mounted signs of the existing businesses already. So you're going to see a perpetuation of additional businesses putting them out so they can get their signage further out in front.
I'm not sure I agree with that, Ryan, because when we didn't know they were illegal, we didn't have an abundance of feather flags all up and down Main Street. And so I guess I'm confused with why you think there would be this overabundance. Although I will admit, I have thought about putting 10 out in front of my shop because I just think this is ridiculous. I really think this is a little bit of a silly thing that the city is concentrating on to hurt us, our advertising, and not to help us attract people to our downtown.
I would disagree with that, Debbie. I came here as the downtown development director. I believe in our Main Street. I believe in our small businesses. And individually, I understand where you're coming from, but I think collectively, as you look at a group, as you look at a district, and we don't have a lot of design standards in most of our zone districts, but the central business district is a little bit more special because of the historic nature of it. And the feather flags, they do detract from the aesthetics of the historic nature of downtown. And I've had business owners that have contacted me. They don't want to be named publicly, but they agree that that there's a detraction there. They don't want to speak up, though. I know Rick has had people have contacted him. People have contacted Ryan LeClaire as well. It's not as unified as you think it is.
Yes, ma'am, you'd like to add to the conversation?
I would. You keep talking about the safety of pedestrians and that the feather flags are hazardous. My point of view is that it is more hazardous since 90% of the signage on the walls is blocked by trees and cannot be seen. Addresses cannot be seen. So vehicles, as they're driving down Main Street and looking for that place they're trying to find, are not paying attention to the pedestrians, and that adds a far greater hazard to the pedestrian than the feather flag does. I think that's unrealistic to say that the feather flags are hazardous when there's far more dangers out there. And I think that's just, we've talked about trimming the trees. That really hasn't happened, and there's really no great way to trim the trees in a way that the signage on the walls are going to be seen. Something has to be done, whether it's feather flags or you give us some other option for signage that helps the automobile traffic find the places they're looking for more easily. I think the feather flag solves that problem very, very quickly and easily until you can come up with a better solution. At this point, pedestrians are in far greater danger from the people that don't know where they're going on the street.
Thank you for that input. Does anything else from council? Do you have other comments or questions you mentioned perhaps?
I do. I mean, from my perspective, I know that council has said that they want to be business friendly, that they want to encourage business owners, and the business owners that certainly all of the ones that I have heard from have been very pro feather flag. They've noted that they've seen their business decrease when they weren't allowed to have feather flags out. We heard that from the Chamber of Commerce. We heard that from multiple businesses. From my perspective, there's a far greater danger of bad aesthetics from having vacant storefronts because our businesses can't stay in business because people don't know where they are or don't know that they're open than there is from having the limited number of feather flags that we've seen on Main Street while there has been this moratorium in effect for essentially the past almost 3 years. So from my perspective, I don't see this as a big concern, allowing feather flags on Main Street. I think it's important to our businesses, and I think that we should be supporting them.
I would like to add to that.
Sure. Yes, we'll get to you in a second, Tim.
Sorry. I'm one of those old drivers that is going down Main Street, and I want to second what Pamela was just saying is the fact that I'm so busy worrying about people pulling out because it is angled parking, which I do not want to eliminate, do not want to go to parallel parking or anything that way. But I do find it difficult to look at the wall signs when I'm looking for an address. The feather flags do tend to stick out positively for me driving down Main Street in order to be able to see where I'm trying to go. I have to admit, I don't shop as much as I should out and about. And that's why it's all the more important for somebody at my age or whatever to be able to see where I'm going and where I want to go. So I think we need to still come up with a compromise of some sort to be able to allow the feather flags in some shape and sign and not make it yes or no completely, but try and find a happy medium if there is one to be had. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question. I've only lived here for 7, going on 8 years now, and I love downtown, and I try to buy gifts, anything when I'm shopping that I can find down there. And I really believe in our business district. But I'm curious, before the feather flags, how did you all, what did you use? Did you have special signage in your windows, or before you started using feather flags, what worked for you guys to bring customers in? What other things did you use?
Well, I've been in business 17 years, and I've used a feather flag the whole time. And also I had banners that I hung up in front of if I was doing a sale. But I don't use the feather flags very often, just when I'm having a special sale, or so sometimes I would use a banner that would advertise my sale.
And we've been in business 5 years now, and we've used a feather flag the whole time.
Okay.
What did Sammy use do you have a sandwich board?
Yes, I've been in business 11 years on Main Street, and we use just a sandwich board, which is somewhat effective because it can be seen from the roadway. But the feather flags actually bring more attention. And the big difference is the trees have made a big difference as far as the visibility of the businesses are concerned. Not only are they bigger, but they're also fuller. And so that increases every year. And they have not been maintained to the point where you can still see the fronts of the buildings. So that has been, because of the configuration of Main Street, it has created a problem as far as making our businesses more visible.
Thank you for that. Tim, would you like to jump in here?
Yes, please. Thank you. I agree with Amy and Kathy. I don't see much of a problem with the feathered flags. I have walked downtown. I actually walked downtown with a business owner, and I noticed the trees, and I'm not saying anything bad about who takes care of the trees and that, but they need to be trimmed. A lot of them were touching the buildings. They are blocking a lot of the signage, but I don't see anything wrong with the feathered flags as far as let's just get them up there. One thing I don't want to see is a feathered flag that just is open as in the illustration that Patrick put up, open, open, open. But I don't think that's that anybody's doing, or sell. I think what they're going to try to do is get the name of their business up on that flag, get it out there. Do I think there needs to be a moratorium of 3 to 4 months? No. I think this should be an open thing. I think I don't think it's going to become a flagged street. I think this helps businesses, and I think as people are driving down the street, especially right now with the trees, nobody can find the business, or they can find a lot of the businesses, but some they can't. And you know what? I don't see it as a pedestrian hazard. If they've been up for this long, people have walked around feathered flags in other cities for years. I have no issue with the feathered flags. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I do have a question, Patrick. You mentioned that that if we move wall-mounted banner signs from requiring a permit to a permitted use, that creates a tracking issue? Would you tell us a little more about that, please?
So right now, banner permits, you have to pull a permit through the city to post them. If you remove them from that category, we don't really have a method of tracking how many times people have used banner permits at that point. There's no application that comes into us that we then have a record of. I would also like to respond a little bit to what Councilmember Dennehy said. We don't have, as a municipality, the ability to specify the language that can go into a sign. Catherine can go into the legalities of this, but there was a Supreme Court decision a few years ago that said we have to be content neutral in our regulations. So whether someone wants to put their own business name and branding efforts associated with that, or just put up something that says now open, we've got no ability to regulate that. If you go with the feather flag signs, you go with whatever the person who's displaying that sign wants to have on it. We can't regulate that. We can regulate height, we can regulate to some extent location, but we can't regulate content.
Time, manner, place.
Yes.
I think, though, we have a pretty good indicator based on the feather flags that are currently on Main Street and in the Central Business District as to what content would likely be on any additional or future ones, which I think may have been Councilmember Dennehy's point there. But understood that we can't regulate content.
So I've got some hypotheticals. If council was in favor of pursuing the proposed changes, you mentioned that there were vague provisions, and Patrick, you mentioned that the purpose of the city sign code would be in conflict with the changes that, at least that are proposed currently. What would it take? If there are vague provisions created by the additional language, what additional language would we need to not have vague provisions, if you're following me?
I'm following you. I would have to study that question. I would need something that is enforceable, something that offers clarity within how the ordinance is written. At the moment, I don't find that it's there, and as I was reviewing this, my mandate was to deconstruct this and see where the flaws were, not necessarily what needed to be done to make it more palatable and enforceable.
Mm-hmm. Understand. In my work experience, I dealt a lot with procedures, oftentimes mandatory procedures, but the saying that we had in the business world about procedures was that procedures are set in stone until you change them. And I think that we may be at that point here that if if council is in favor of either proceeding with this proposed revision to the code that we have in front of us, or that I think there's a couple different paths open to us. Approve the language as written, to send to the Planning Commission and to council for approval, to request provisions or revisions to the language that are more palatable to our city staff, because that to me that's an important thing too, or reject the proposed language. I think that's kind of where we are, and this is more of a thumbs up because the conversation may or may not need to continue from here. But if we gave it a thumbs up, the effect of this proposal in front of us was that it would go to the council for formal action. Is that correct?
It would have to go through Planning Commission because
Planning
it's
Commission
Title
first. 17.
But yes, thumbs up, thumbs down, and if it's thumbs up, what direction would you like staff to move?
Okay. Other questions? Yes.
Yes.
Mhm. Comments?
Look
Sure.
down this
Yeah,
way
okay.
sometime.
I do. You gotta.
Well, I
you
tried
gotta.
this earlier, and that,
Well, it's not in front of me. I'm sorry.
I just have a quick thing. Whatever we decide, I'd like for Ryan to put a number, or Patrick, if you could, to kind of give us a ballpark as to if we're going to do some kind of, restrictions, what's it going to cost in staff time? We just don't have a lot of bandwidth there. And it's expensive if we're going to have to use our enforcement officers. And but I think that's an issue that regardless of how we feel about this, that's something that I want to put in it, that you just kind of give us an idea what it'll cost. Thank you.
Emily.
Thanks.
Emily's been trying to jump in here, I
Right,
think.
thanks. I really struggle with this. I too shop on Main Street quite a bit and really love the fact that we have a thriving Main Street. But I guess I'm different from some others. I don't have trouble finding stores, whether I'm driving or walking. I look up an address wherever I need to look it up, and then I know where to go. I mean, our Main Street is pretty, we have numbered cross streets. So I can, the evens on the south, odds on the north, it's that kind of thing. So I don't look for feather signs or any kind of signs when I'm driving and looking for a place to park, or when I'm walking, looking for a particular store. So I have trouble, seeing that as the main. I mean, I understand it from the store owner's point of view, but from a shopper's point of view, I struggle with that. And I can't get away from, if everyone decides they have to have the same kind of feather sign so that they can be seen around everyone else's signs and the trees and everything else, I just think the end result is something that we don't want. I would rather kind of go back to being creative here. Staff, council members, business owners, shoppers, whoever needs to be involved, and figure out a way that we can, maybe it's a combination of things. Maybe it's trimming the trees more. Maybe it's having some kind of directional signs at each corner that at least pedestrians can see. These are the shops that are in this block on this side of the street. I'm just trying to think of something that would be more compatible with our historic downtown. And I just can't picture us having a downtown where every or nearly every storefront decides they have to have a feather sign so that they can be seen. So I'm just not, I don't want to just say, no, absolutely not, but I just think we need to be more creative. And I've said, regarding the backing out problem and driving down Main Street, I've said for a long time to staff that I think the speed limit is too high on Main Street. I think it's dangerous for cars backing out, cars driving, pedestrians crossing the street. I think this, that's going to be a whole separate decision. We need to do a particular process, and if we're going to consider doing that. But I don't look for feather signs to find where I'm shopping. I'm happy to walk, or if I don't want to walk very far, I know which block to go to, and I know which side of the street you all are on. So that's where I am. I'm not ready to say yes to this proposal.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Well, I don't get to vote, so what I say doesn't really matter unless it's a very, I came here in '74. I liked it here. Went away for 5 years and came back. I think you're making a mistake. I think this is a fad. There's got to be a better thing than this. I think it will be tacky, but I think you have shops there. You know better than I do. I fell for the flower fang. I fell for that too. I saw the real estate companies do it, so in my building, I got to. I hated them. Every time I drove in there, I thought, this isn't what I want to look like. And they're laying in the back room. I won't put them out. I think it's a fad. I think it will go away. But Emily is correct. Everybody can do this. I do have a concern about using a city property. If you're going to use it, you're going to put a stake in there. You've got to have a license. I don't know how you're going to accomplish that, because you're putting that flag on the owners, which is the residents of Canyon City's property, as far as I know. You don't own that. The city does. the residents do. So A, I think you're gonna make it look tacky. I'm not against it. I wouldn't vote against it. If you want to do it, you live there, you have your shops there. Personally, I had them. I won't use them. So, but thanks.
Other comments from council? I would like to address briefly the speed limit problem, because we have addressed that as council previously, perhaps before you came on council, Emily. But we had a report from our engineer at the time, Adam Lancaster, where they actually did the study on the average speed limit, and which figures into how you can adjust your speed limit. And there was an observed average speed limit with a standard deviation. And what that showed is that looking at the upper limits of that standard deviation, that 25 was appropriate. Unfortunately, from my perspective, our council was not really in favor of lowering speed limits at that time. But what I didn't point out at that time, that I will now, is that our engineer had his thumb on the scale. That when you have an average, you have both a high side and a low side, and the low side encompassed 20 miles an hour as a permissible speed limit on Main Street. So that is a subject for a different time.
And can I just add to that? I think one thing too, that I think our downtown may be healthier than it was back, and I'm not sure how many years ago that was when Adam Lancaster was here, but we're pretty parked up down there. It's wonderful. There's a lot of people utilizing stores and restaurants and other things downtown. And so maybe there's more congestion now than there was at the time that he did that. I don't know, just throwing that out.
So that is for another time. Yes.
I just had one more thought I wanted to offer. I guess I'm a little disappointed if staff thought that the wording was vague in the ordinance. I mean, it's been with staff since the end of October, and we're now at the beginning of January. I would be all for, if this does move on to Planning Commission and then City Council, I would be all for staff making proposed changes to try to make sure that it is something that is as tight as possible and as easy to enforce as possible. But I also, I would like to see in the future that happen before it comes to general government, so that we really can consider an ordinance that doesn't have that particular problem. Thanks.
So I would point out that this particular ordinance did not originate with staff. This was the work of the merchants themselves who put this together.
I understand, but it has been with the city and the city administrator and Director Sellers, if I'm getting her new title correct, we're in a meeting about it, and they've seen it, and it's been with the city since the end of October. So I mean, I think that's been a long enough period of time that I would have hoped that some of those wording challenges would have already been addressed before this meeting. So just in the future, I would appreciate it if we could make sure that we can use these meetings as constructively as possible and have the wording be as far along and as tight as we would like it to be. But I would I'm all for, if this does move to Planning Commission, that staff have that opportunity to ensure that the language is as tight as possible so that it can be enforced. Thanks.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes, please do.
I think I speak for most everybody with the downtown, and I think all of us would be willing to work with whoever needs it to get the wording proper so that it could be very easily enforceable. We would be willing to work with whoever to make this work in order to make it enforceable, not only for the city, but for us as well. The guidance and the requirements that would be needed to make this work.
Thank you. Jerry, did I see you reaching for your button there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just embarrassed because I own a business downtown and I don't have an opinion on this. I don't know what to say. My building is completely covered by a tree. You can't see. I have a patio, so people walking by, oh, that's a bar, that's a restaurant. We can tell. And then minimal lighting at night, but that's my responsibility to light it up better. So even though my business is covered by a tree, I still choose not to put a feather flag out, because like Preston said, I'm with you. I don't find it attractive, but I don't think I need to do that. I was just thinking maybe I would even be willing to volunteer myself to walk Main Street up and down and ask every business owner how they felt about it and just get a consensus. I don't know if that will help. The only other thing is, we feel that the ordinance as written is very vague and it can cause other problems. Can we decide to review it and make some adjustments to it before we either approve or deny it tonight? Can we do
So our role tonight is if you look on the, we have a staff recommendation, and our role tonight is to give direction to staff, either to give a thumbs up. We're not taking a formal action tonight because this is not a council meeting, it's just a general government meeting.
Okay.
But we're here for advice, essentially, to advise staff which direction we would like to see us go. And so what we've done in the past in these kinds of situations is gone around and thumbs up or thumbs down, or on some stated suggestion of the direction that we'd like to see things move. And so that's what we'll probably be doing tonight. But yes, sir.
Where are we at right now? Can you have flower, why do I say that? Feather flags? Can't have them? I saw some today.
We have a moratorium.
There is a moratorium in enforcement at the
So
moment.
if we do what John's saying, we'll continue with the moratorium until we beat out some language that everybody's happy with. Good luck with that, but let's give it a try. I mean, and at least the shop owners know if they're going to do a feather flag, they better get with it. And we'll see. But I'd keep it going. I mean, we can't stop it. Keep it going with the moratorium and give a month or two and get some wording. If we can't, then we need to debate it again. This is getting long, way too long.
So let me restate. What you're saying is continue with the moratorium, work on the language, and bring it back to general government, or send it on to planning commission from there.
It has to go to planning commission?
Well, if we
Anything
revise
that
the
amends
code.
Title 17 has
That's
to go to a
right. You're
public
right. You're
hearing
right.
before planning
I
commission.
was only on that for 9 years, so I guess I forget this stuff. Yes, let's do that as quickly as possible and see what happens. But I would continue with the moratorium to allow it to keep going. There shouldn't be any confusion in that. I think it's confusing.
Okay?
I have one more comment.
Yes, sure,
too.
please.
I mean, you can go whatever direction you want there. It would be helpful to me, and I'm happy to help with this, or whoever needs to be involved. It would be helpful for me to see what other historic main streets have done in the way, if anybody's done it, in the way of improving directions to get to different stores along Main Street. I know I've seen, like in another state, a historic Main Street area. Actually, it was a downtown with multiple streets, but it was a historic area in a particular city in Montana, for example, where they had kind of an overhang that went over the boardwalk or sidewalk, whatever it was, and then signs hung down from that overhang. So you could find stores that way when you were a pedestrian. Well, it wasn't an awning, but it was that kind of a thing. And I'm not saying that's a solution, but it would be good, I think, for us to know collectively, are there any communities that have solved this issue for businesses and made it and done it in a way that respects the historic district and also the needs of the business owner. So I just hope we can pull in more information on that.
Okay. I think what we should do now is go around, seek council's advice, and we have the proposal as stated by the mayor. I think that we're not necessarily bound by that as individual council members. It's all right to modify, expand, or restrict what that advice was. But Kathy, you want to get us started?
I think we need to continue to work on this a little bit more, which means maintain the moratorium for the time being, see if there isn't some wordage that can be changed. Just basically be able to come to better terms between staff and the shop owners and be able to still try and see. If we can't come to that, then we can't, but I think we still need to give it another try.
And another try, would that staff and business owners would work on that, and then it would go to planning commission, or would you expect that it comes back here?
I would like for it to come back to us, but that's just me. I guess it's just to make, I'd like to at least to see where we're at after all of that, so I would like for it to come back to us first.
Okay, thank you. Emily?
Along those same lines, and what I've already said, that I would like to see more creative thought put into this with the idea of respecting the looks of the historic Main Street that we do have, and also, you know, the city and whoever needs to take a closer look at what, if anything, needs to be done about the trees. I have not personally looked at them just from that point of view. You know, what are these trees doing? How do they work, or do they not work for downtown? Are they too big now? I mean, you know, periodically, I believe the city has had to replace trees and start with smaller trees again. So I don't know if we're at that point or not. But so I'd like to know what other cities have done that have a similar Main Street. I'd like to know if there's things we should be doing about the trees. And just keep putting our creative thought into looking at this from all the different angles, including the shop owners' needs, the pedestrians' needs, the drivers' needs, and so forth.
Okay, thank you for that, Emily. Jerry?
Yeah, you guys tell me, is it a good idea for me to go downtown and take a survey? Okay, well, that's what I'm going to do, and that's going to help me make a decision. So that's where I'm at. But yeah, come back here, fine tune some things, talk about it.
Okay.
But I'll volunteer myself to gather some data.
I'm going to jump, thank you for that, Jerry. Tim, would you like to chime in here, please? Hey, you're on mute.
I have work going on in the background. I apologize. I have somebody here working. I'd like to see the moratorium continue. I think there does need to be some more discussion on this. I'm going to stick with what I'm saying. I don't see a real big problem with this, but let's get some discussion and see what we can hammer out with the business owners and between the city and the business owners, and let's get this worked out.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm in substantial agreement with what you said, Kathy. I think it would be appropriate to, for staff to get with the owners, work on some language. I would like to see it come back to us. Mr. Mayor, you've chimed in once already.
Well, I would like to add, you're
Sure.
going to, Jerry, you're going to go down and poll everybody and give us an idea, and will you need bail money or anything like that?
No, I actually look forward to it.
I think we probably won't, and maybe that, whatever we come up with is brought up for review every year, because I do think that we're going through a fad here with that. And this is my 50th year of being in business. And honest to goodness, I never heard of a feather flag. I personally don't like them, but it's your business, it's your downtown. I don't think they fit, but I would not be against it.
Yeah, Andrea.
I'm interested in looking some more at what, other historic towns do. I've lived in a couple of them. And it's kind of a checkered thing. I'm trying to think of Salida. I think they occasionally have feather flags. So there has to be some kind of regulation so that you don't have an entire downtown of feather flags. Something that's like a time limited, like is part of the language, something like that. But in listening to everyone tonight, I'm getting a sense that this is a zoning planning commission issue. And now and Jerry, you've been served there. Isn't there a public hearing? Once this does go to them, there'll be a public hearing. So people will be able to give input, correct or not?
Yeah, as Patrick can attest, we
Yeah.
went through this sign code for a long time.
Right.
Back and
Right.
forth, open
Yeah.
to the public, so forth, and what we have now is what was decided.
Exactly. So I think that this belongs back with our planning commission. Council probably wants to look at this some more, but I would encourage us to move quickly. Let's not pull this out indefinitely, just because, you know, we don't want to say yes or no. And I'm as bad as the rest of everybody else. I'm in that boat too. I'm having a hard time deciding myself how we should approach this. But I think the planning commission has the experience and the tools to make the final decision. I think council just needs to do a little footwork before we do that. Thanks.
Amy?
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. To maybe follow up a little bit on what Andrea said, in terms of moving quickly and not belaboring the point any longer, I think we have a joint Planning Commission, City Council, General Government meeting, or Vision Committee meeting in February. And I almost wonder if it would make sense for this to be added to that agenda so that everybody who might have input, Planning Commission or City Council, can be part of that revised feedback process, given that it will have to go through Planning Commission and then City Council anyway. Seems like it might make sense to use that opportunity to both make sure that we act swiftly and also make sure that all of the cooks are in the kitchen at the same time. I'm supportive, definitely, of staff working with businesses on any revised language to make sure that it's as tight as possible. I think there are a couple of issues that haven't come up tonight with regard to, does this need to be a yearly permitted thing, or is this a one permit and you're done, or is this a no permit needed? And I would encourage us to have those as part of those discussions so that we, again, aren't belaboring the point and come to a decision point where we actually still have several more decisions that need to be made. So I'm supportive of, I think, what the general consensus is, which is having staff, business owners work together to try to find language that will work for everyone and that clearly addresses all of the issues that are out there, and would encourage us to think about February and that joint meeting as the next time that we talk about this. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Another question, and maybe City Administrator Stevens or Attorney Sellers. If and when we do come up with a proposal that goes through the Planning Commission process and then City Council, is that City Council working in its quasi-judicial role? And if so, does that put limitations on how this process needs to go forward at this point?
I can answer that. No, you're legislating, so there's no restrictions on who you talk to, what you talk about in the public, anything like that. So it's pretty open. The only thing I'd mention is, and Patrick touched on this just a little bit, is that when you do amend your code, there are standards for doing that in the UDC, and you're just going to need to make sure that you follow those standards. And I think Patrick has kind of hinted, at least, or indicated that there might be some issues there with whether or not you're meeting those standards for a text amendment to your DC, with the statements as to what the sign standards are intended to do. So we may need to work on that issue as well, to bring these forward without any hurdles, if that's where you go.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Mr. Administrator, is this as clear as mud, or do you think you have a direction
I think
here?
we've got a direction, and we'll reach out to the business owners and set up a meeting to start working on some language.
Okay. Is there any further comment or business for us to consider?
John, can I ask?
Sure.
So you'll be in contact with us, Ryan, and we'll set up a time when we can meet. And also, Jerry, I would be interested to know what you find when you do when you do canvass our businesses.
Of course.
I'd be interested in that.
Of course.
Because, if there's a majority of business owners that say, absolutely, we don't want flags, we're not here to force people to do anything, any kind of promotions of their businesses. And so we really want to work and be cohesive in our downtown as business owners. So I thank you, Jerry, that you're going to do that, because I would like to know that. Thank you. And I thank all of you for hearing us.
Sure.
And I like them anyway, Preston. I like feather flags. You know, I follow fads, you know that,
What?
right?
Oh, I thought you need bail money? What? No, I'm just kidding. Thanks.
Maybe.
Thank you.
All right, then, with no further business to come before us, we are adjourned.